Rangers Journal Night.
Good evening. Welcome to your Rangers Journal news for the Friday night, where we cover what's happened through the week. With me tonight, quite a small panel, just me and Doug, so you get the benefit of our wisdom, or some might say something else. Who knows? How you doing, Doug?
Not too bad, not too bad. It's been a busy week, so I'm looking forward to having a relaxing weekend and hopefully some more excellent football.
Do you know what? I would take that. Scoring 6, yeah, it was quite a nice feeling, actually, wasn't it?
Yeah, not too bad at all. I would definitely take that every week.
Yeah, I've missed that. It's just nice not to have to struggle over the line where Techi 1-0. So, okay. So I guess first up, let's look at the pitch side of it. So we got some news today. Matondo and Cortez.
I think Dave may be freezing up a little bit. He was having a wee bit of internet trouble beforehand, so hopefully he'll come back with us in a little bit. But I shall endeavour to chat on in the meantime. I believe he was about to say Matondo and Cortez maybe coming back into the fold, which is good news. We've really struggled at times with options for our wings. We've obviously been playing. We've played Redvan there. We've played GFD here on the left wing in particular. We've had to play Romani out west of his sort of main position, which is the number 10. A lot of people have been really keen to see him playing in that number 10 position, but he's not been able to due to, as I say, a kind of a lack of really good other options there. So getting Matondo and Cortez back as options is a really big positive. I think that'll give us more options to try new things, but as they potentially play Barami through the centre and get a bit of pace into that front line as well, because there are times when I think a little bit more pace would help the team in terms of pushing forward. And is that Dave back?
It is.
Well
Thank you for covering for me.
That's fine. If there's anything I can do, it's talk nonsense at length. So
that's what we're here for, mate. Talk nonsense about the famous. So Cortez and Matondo both back in. Obviously, not going to be jumping in to start in 90 minutes. We can't imagine, especially since both of them are made of glass. But it feels to me, Doug, like another kind of spoke in the wheel that's coming together now. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying just while you were away there. I think, having those options is a real big plus. Getting a bit of pace into that front line, or a bit more pace into that front line, giving us the options and just having more room to manoeuvre. I think pace is something that will work well in the system that Clement wants to play. So having two guys that have both looked pretty speedy. Cortez in particular, I'm most excited about, to be honest. I know what Matondo brings. I'm not convinced he's good enough sort of long term in terms of a first team player, but he can definitely bring something with his pace, and he does have moments in him. Obviously, the famous goal. Sorry, but yeah, Cortez, I'd really like to see, because he looks like he might be able to bring a little bit more, and if we can get him on the pitch regularly, and that maybe allows Barami then to play centrally, we can hopefully see some exciting stuff.
That's it, and I think for me, Cortez, as you've said, there's almost an excitement factor there, but we just haven't seen what he can do yet. We've seen wee glimpses of it, but it's not translated into a run in the team, unfortunately. Obviously, a lot of folk kind of calling him made of glass as well. I get it in purely a Rangers career kind of sense, but by all accounts, he was pretty much injury-free prior to coming with us. So hopefully he can kick on from there. Okay, so a couple other things around the actual football, and then we'll probably have a look at the AGM stuff as well. Don't know if you saw, Doug, the St Johnstone game, potential handball. So that's been reviewed under the SFA's key match incident review panel, and they've come out and said that they do feel that we should have had a penalty for that one. Would you agree with that, firstly? I don't know if you can remember that one in the St Johnstone game.
If it's one I'm thinking of, then yeah, I think we could have got that. I think I think I touched on it in another pod that handballs are such an odd thing now that I think there's always going to be ones that are going to go each way, whether right or wrong, and we're going to have this throughout the season, no doubt. We'll probably get to the end, and there'll be not just us, but multiple teams will have had things reviewed that have gone maybe one way or the other. So I think it's just a bit part and parcel for penalties in particular. It's kind of easier when you're talking about free kicks. I think referees will be more inclined to just give it if they think it could be. Whereas obviously with penalties, I think there's that, there's obviously the bigger jeopardy there, so they're a bit more cautious. But then at the same time, some of them seem to be a little bit more, it touched the hand, must be a penalty. So yeah, I think we could have got that one, but like I say, I think we'll see things like that throughout the season.
Yeah, and I mean the hope is that it's the old line, isn't it? They balance themselves out over the season, so you can accept a few being wrongly called. I mean, it shouldn't be too often with VAR on the scene, but as long as by the end of the season you're not feeling like all of them have gone against you, then I guess you can't complain too much.
Absolutely, and I've always said if you're relying on a single penalty to win you a game, then you're not Rangers. So
I think the problem is we are close to that at the minute, mate.
Well, and again, I mean, we shouldn't be. So that's why we need to be playing more like last weekend, so that when those decisions that maybe should go our way don't, it doesn't make a difference, and we can just look back at it and go, oh well.
That's it, absolutely. And just another one that I've kind of picked out that's come in, I think it was today as well. The SFA have opened disciplinary proceedings against ourselves, Celtic, and Motherwell for pyro in the semi-finals. I think we were on a pod before where we spoke about this and basically said it was inconsiderate idiots, I think is the polite version of what we said. It's harming the club now, mate. That is very likely going to be a fine coming our way. Just briefly, do you want to kind of summarize your thoughts on that? I know we have gone over it before.
Yeah, like you said, we talked about it on the pod. I was pretty passionate about it at the time because it's something I feel strongly about. Like you said, it's hurting the club financially, but more important, it can hurt, and it could hurt people seriously in the stands, and that's ultimately why I have zero tolerance for it. I understand why people like it, and even I have seen, particularly some of the ones you get in other countries. They do look amazing. I'm not trying to deny that, but it's not just a killing fun thing. It's a removing the chance that some kid ends up losing a hand because something blows up, or worse. These things have happened with fireworks and things like that. So it's a danger, and like you say, it's hurting the club now. So. They either it needs to be just cut out completely, or if it's something that people are really desperate for, then they need to get representatives to speak to the club to find safe ways to do something, because there are safe ways to have like not indoor fireworks per se, but obviously you get things fired off when people win trophies and stuff like that. So there's things that can be done, and maybe there's an avenue that way that something can happen. But in terms of just people taking stuff into the stadium, it has to stop.
Aye, and that's it. I think they do it in conjunction with the club in a safe manner that you get the approval for. It doesn't hurt the club, doesn't run the risk of hurting others. I would fully agree with that. I guess just a follow-up question, Doug. I think there's a fairly big game due up just shortly. Do you think the charge and sort of the club stance on it, do you think that'll make any impact for that game?
Probably not. Folk will do what they're going to do. So if they're going to bring stuff with them, then they'll do it. I mean, maybe if there's some increased police presence or they're doing additional checks or something, maybe it'll make one or two think twice. But as the adage goes, there's always one. And I think the kind of guy, the kind of folk that have got the mindset that they want to be the cool guy, and be the one that can be like, oh yeah, that was me, wasn't that cool? They're gonna push ahead regardless.
Yeah, I tend to agree, unfortunately, mate. And yeah, I do think we'll see it probably on both sides, to be honest. Not going to do our club any favours, and that club can worry about themselves, to be quite blunt. Just on the news of fans causing trouble and all, there was a interesting one just popped into the group chat before we came live as well. So apparently we have been granted permission to sell alcohol at the upcoming Spurs game and the Old Firm, but it's not the final, obviously, because that'll be at Hampden. It's the New Year derby, and we've had permission as a club to sell from a marquee. Do you see a problem with drink at football? Because again, it's quite a contentious issue for a lot of people.
I feel like in some games it could maybe be a problem. But I mean, I'm not sure. I'm kind of in two minds about it because I know there's places all around where alcohol is allowed in stadiums and it's perfectly fine. But then there's also differences in how cultures approach drinking as well. So how well that would work in Scotland, which let's face it, does have a poor binge drinking culture, along with the rest of Britain. I'm not sure. I kind of like this sort of. As I say, I'm not sure whether I'd want full bars in the stadium, with beside your pies and that kind of thing, where people could just go back again and again. But having the kind of marquees there apparently, I think I read it's going to be a 4-drink minimum per person as well. So things like that, I think it's probably a good halfway house to get a little bit of both in there. Because I'm not against people having a drink, or a couple of drinks when they're enjoying a game. I do that myself. It would just be that, and again, it's always a minority. 49,950 fans would be absolutely fine, but you'd get that 10 to 50 that would cause trouble. And it's something like I can just see someone, we're getting pumped in an Old Firm, and someone's been at the drinks, and then they end up falling off the top of a concourse or something. And it's that type of thing again that you need to avoid. So not against it dead set. I don't think it's as dangerous as something as fireworks, but there are things I think that need to be considered. But I like the idea of the marquees.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea personally, and I think in some ways it could almost be safer. I'm with you. I don't think you should be able to just sit and tan shot after shot at the game. That seems a bit pointless. If you want to do that, head out on a Friday or Saturday night. But I do think for a lot of people, because they can't get drink at the stadium, they'll just get absolutely battered before they even go. And because they're drinking to extremes, so that it sees them over the game, so to speak, they're actually more likely to do something stupid, I would say, than, like you've said, the kind of people that are just going to have a couple of pints or go for a quick pint at half time, that kind of thing. So, yeah, for me, I think it's positive. I noticed in the comments, Scotty's called out the SNP have an issue with it. I don't know if it's just the SNP, but obviously more recently it has been them that've kind of knocked back the idea of it. It's something you see in rugby as well quite a lot. They do sell drink at rugby. It's specifically a football thing that's deemed we can't do it. So I think it'll be interesting to see whether this opens the door for kind of other clubs as well. And, if we can find, I guess, like you said, Doug, that happy medium between, getting absolutely rat-arsed and just a total ban. So I think it's a positive step for me. Okay, so right, positive steps. None of that. We're going to talk about the AGM now. No, so we're not going to go through the whole thing. And the guys on the pod the other night did. Ryan came on and gave us quite a good breakdown, actually, of the AGM. But I just wanted to pick out a couple of points to talk through. So we'll start with one off the pitch. One of the things that was said in the chairman's statement is that they are, again, looking to restructure and reorganise the board. The ones that were elected at the AGM were only elected for 1 year rather than 2. And what that means is everyone's actually up for election at the same time. Basically, the big news from it is they're looking for the board not to be made up of investors anymore. They want a non-executive presence, people in there to do a job as opposed to people just sinking money in. And also that this board was going to be based in Scotland. So you've got a few, obviously Dave King did most of it from South Africa. More recently, you've got Alistair Johnson, who has commuted over from the States for the role. They're not really present. So I guess firstly, in this day and age, do you think it's valuable to have the people here actually at the club? Or do you see that as a bit less of a barrier given the kind of communication technology we have at hand?
For the particular role of the board, I don't think it's necessarily that important. Like you say, it's easy to keep in touch in the modern world. There is something to be said about being in the stadium regularly, though, and getting the sense of the fan base and understanding more than just like viewing social media and things like that. So I do think you want at least some of them. But my opinion has always been that the board should be stepping back from the day-to-day running of the club anyway, because that to me is what the CEO's job is. He's there to run the day-to-day. The board are there to set the standards, to set the goals, and then to make sure that to hold this
basically.
Yeah, exactly. They paint the big picture, and then it's the CEO's job to fulfill that, and then their role is to hold the CEO accountable. If not, so to me that means they don't necessarily need to be as close to the ground. It does sound like though they are going for a model that is going to be more that they will be involved. They talked about them being involved. So if that's the case, then yes, they should be local so that they can do it. If you're going to go that way, then go all the way and be available and be in discussion regularly and making sure that again you're pushing a vision forward, that you're holding the CEO accountable. So if that's the route you want to go, that's fine. But being local would be good for that. And like I say, it gives you that ability to be in the stadium, getting a sense of fans and things like that, which is a positive. One of the funny things I kept seeing was across Twitter or X, I should say, like for months, there's been loads of people talking about get the board out, etc., and how much they hate them, and all of that was still going on even after the post that said the complete board will be completely replaced. I'm like sitting there like, is this not you? Why are you not all cheering? You're getting what you want.
They're going.
They're still there going boo, get the board. So I think that's a good thing as well, that we're going to get fresh faces in. I'd like to see some younger faces in there as well. Just because I want to see, let's say, new ideas, modern ideas, push the club forward. I've not had a chance to talk about the new CEO yet, and I think he's an exciting appointment to me. He's someone that has got experience, worked in arguably the biggest club in football. And so, I think he can come in and do some good things, especially from a commercial point of view and pushing the club forward that way. So I want people that are going to be there to support him doing those things. And as they could be bringing ideas forward to him and doing more than just sitting there putting money in, and maybe guiding with one hand with your investment in mind. If you have a fresh board that aren't investors, like you say, they've not got that hand steering partly towards their investment interests, and you can have people that are steering purely in the club interests.
Yeah, and I think that segues quite nicely in the second part of that, the fact that they aren't going to be investors. They're going to be there in essence. They're going to be employed to do a job. I think it gives us scope to see true professionals that are used to managing football clubs coming in. I'm not going to sit here and say, the board are the worst thing ever. We've had worse. But I think it's also fair to say that they absolutely could have done a better job over the last kind of 4 or 5 years, especially. And this, for me, I think, as you said, gives the opportunity for people to come in, new ideas, fresh thinking, hopefully someone with a football background, so they are used to working in that kind of environment, because it is quite unique, even in the world of business. Graham Brown in the comments, I'd love to see Laudrup and Souness on the board. What's your thoughts on that, Doug? Laudrup and Souness, they kind of called on. Well, clearly you think Laudrup would be interested. um,
Yeah, I
they
just
called on
replied to that one.
Souness. Yeah, they called on Souness when they were doing the manager hunt. Rumor has it he preferred Frank Lampard over Clement, but has since come out very supportive of Clement. Said that he was also excellent in the interviews. So, what would you think to someone like Souness coming into the board?
I'm not a big fan of Souness specifically, purely because he's been away from the game in any kind of meaningful way for a long time. He's obviously been doing his punditry and things like that, which is fine. And football has moved on a lot. So much the game is more modern, the business is more modern. The difficulties are different to what they used to be. Things like financial fair play and balancing those types of things. So I'm all for football people. That's fine. As long as I've always said, as long as they've got the skills and the capabilities to perform whatever role you're looking to put them in, because we talk about having football people at all sorts of levels of the club, and I think it's good to sprinkle them all around. So you talk about having like Rangers men as coaches, and Rangers men at the board, and Rangers men in the hierarchy, and all that's fine as long as they're qualified or at least have an aptitude towards what they're doing. There's plenty of footballers that have gone on and been done really well in business. Neil McCann is apparently reasonably savvy. He works for an agency. So you can kind of, I feel like you can always tell the difference when they're on like sports scene and things, like the way McCann speaks just sounds a little bit different than some of the
Polished,
other ones.
isn't it?
Yeah,
It's that kind of little bit of polish you don't get elsewhere.
exactly. So, like, excuse me, as I said, my comment there, Laudrup would be an interesting one. The other thing I think that a club like us benefits from is having players that have obviously come from around the world, and so that brings different contacts. And that's a big thing. I think that again, former players can be useful for having their contacts from the other places they've been. Particularly when we've been lucky enough, we had an era where we had some of at one point we've had some of the world's best footballers in terms of the English players when we were getting them in the late 80s, early 90s. And then we've had some really great players, through the 90s as well. So we're lucky to have got players that have played for Barcelona's and Arsenal's and Man United's and things like that. So we can call on people that do have really interesting contacts if we're able to put them in functional and productive places within the club.
Yeah, that's it. And I think one thing you said there jumps out for me is I love the concept of having ex-players, but it is vitally important that they are qualified for the role. Okay, so another point at the AGM, and again, we were on a pod about this, on opposing sides, I hasten to add. Nils Koppen basically came out and said that at present, the youth system isn't fit for purpose. In essence, it's not ready to produce players for the first team. There's too big a gap between the current B team setup and the first team. What did you make of that, Doug?
I actually thought that was a really interesting comment, because when I heard that, my immediate thought was, does that mean he doesn't think our current youth players are good enough for the first team, and thusly is that why they don't play? We've obviously talked at length in various different pods about players like Bailey Rice and Fraser, who got a new contract, and King and the various other young players that are in and about the team but never play, and we've talked about why that is and wanting to see them play. So when I saw that, I was kind of like, okay, so does that mean they've come in, they've looked at these players and they don't think they're good enough? And if so, I mean, that's fine if that's their thought, and obviously if they want to increase those levels, then that's a positive. It doesn't really surprise me, to be honest. That even if some of them, maybe those ones are just on the cusp, but it wouldn't surprise me if they were finding that the younger players weren't quite up to this task, because, like we've talked about again at length, they don't get enough football, and they don't get enough competitive football at the younger levels. So, I don't think it's their fault, but they're going to struggle to be at a first team level or to be approaching a first team level if they're not getting enough football to help push them and propel them in terms of their development.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that we did agree on actually when we had that debate was, regardless of the talent, regardless of what you put about it, if these guys aren't playing, then they will not develop fully ready to play for the first team. Seems kind of obvious. They pointed towards, it sounded like a fairly major restructure in the academy would be coming, and they were talking about doing that in January. What would you like to see there? Bearing in mind that one of your debating points was we couldn't necessarily fix it ourselves because you almost need a league approach for B teams. So, what do you think they could be looking at doing?
They've maybe looked at. I don't know whether. I mean, in my mind, there's two things. If you're restructuring, you're either going to try and adjust who's doing what, i.e., that's a commentary on is the quality of coaches high enough, or you're restructuring to build a new kind of ethos or put in a new kind of way of doing things. So that could just be that maybe they've got ideas from other football and philosophies or other stuff that they've done before. From what I've seen on Twitter and things, I don't think a lot of people know that Nils Koppen has actually been a head of academy in a previous role in one of his old clubs. Now it was a tiny club. I think they're like equivalent to like League 3, League 2, like size if it had been in Scotland kind of thing. So it wasn't like a big club, but he has had a role doing that kind of thing before. So, he's maybe got some contacts or ideas and things that he's looking to bring to it. He does have coaching badges as well, Coppin. He's got, I think he's got an A license. He's got a number of Dutch youth coaching badges as well. So he's done coaching for youth. So a lot of people were talking about, we've put someone in a role with no experience, and I don't necessarily think that's maybe the case. He maybe doesn't have a huge amount of experience, but I think he definitely has ideas, and it seems that he's putting those into place. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that. It's difficult to judge. I don't know enough about the structure of youth football, to be honest, other than, as I say, I do think that the best case would be for us to be in a competitive league of some description with other youth teams, just because I think playing competitive football is the best way to get better at playing competitive football.
Yeah.
So I would assume it'll be one of those two things. He's either going to put in a new kind of philosophy and structure into how the youth development works, or he's going to move some people, maybe bring in some new coaches, or possibly indeed a combination of the two.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point about the competitive matches. I think whatever they're looking to do, it has to involve that. These friendlies, fine, whatever. They're not giving them the right base to then come and stake a claim in the first team. Okay, so there's one other point from the AGM that I wanted to call out, and this one is pretty wild. And that would be the fee, or sorry, not the fee, the incoming funds that we got for Cantwell, Lammers, Goldson, Wright, and McCrory. So apparently, and this was confirmed at the AGM, but for the 5 of them, we took in 800k. Just firstly, as a headline figure, and we'll delve into the depths of it in a minute, because I don't think it is just as simple as, we sold them all for 800k. That's factoring in, payments that we were still due on, like Lammers, as an example, all that kind of good stuff. But as a headline figure, that's pretty embarrassing for me, mate. What's your kind of thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'm kind of in two minds. It's not good. I don't want to be misunderstood in thinking that. Scott Wright, arguably the worst player of them all, I would have said would be worth that on his own. So it is disappointing to hear that. I can kind of understand why it may be happening. So, as I say, right, I'm trying to the three, right, McCrory, and who was the other one that wasn't one of the big players. I feel like you should have got better value for them. But when it comes to particularly Cantwell and Goldson, they were players that, and in fact Lammers as well, they were players who were on high wages for the kind of level of player that they were, and certainly in terms of the level of football they were at with us. And so I think the club were struggling to move them. And I mean, it feels like it was obvious, in fact, that they were struggling to move them. There'd been apparent offers for Lammers that had met the club's values, but they couldn't afford the wages. There was similar rumours that there was clubs interested in Cantwell, but again, couldn't afford to pay him what we were paying him. And so I think they've potentially just went, you know what, we just need to get these people out the door because they're just sucking on the resources of the club. And the manager doesn't want them here, or the fans don't want them there anymore in case the Goldson, who a lot of people were ready to see the back of. And so I think the club have maybe just said, you know what, we just need to draw a line under this and just do what needs done and get them moving and get them out the door. And from that point of view, I kind of agree with them, and I think that did need to be done. We all were lamenting the fact that we had Hadji sitting doing nothing and getting paid. If we'd had Goldson and Cantwell and Scott Wright all sitting about not doing very much and getting paid, we'd have been apoplectic about it. So yes, it's disappointing. It's part of the failures of the club in recent years, because I mean we should have been getting these players out at better times. It's similar to Kent, Morelos, and Lundstrom, and we let it get too far beyond the point where clubs knew that we didn't want them and that they wanted to leave, and so you just undercut all your bargaining power. I mean, the Cantwell one in particular was so public that no one was ever going to pay us anything more than they wanted to pay, because they'd have just went, well, I mean, you can.
All right, we'll get someone else you can stick with. Yeah,
exactly. So from that point of view, we maybe didn't have much choice, but yeah, as you said, it's a terrible headline. It's an embarrassing headline, but to be honest, I've no interest in making much of it. I just draw a line and let's push on, let's move away from all this negative stuff that's happened in the last 12 months and start pushing, trying to get somewhere more positive.
Yeah, and I think just on that, before we kind of move on, well, I say do you, I mean, neither of us truly knows, but I do wonder how much of that was sucked up by what was left on the Lammers deal. Because rumour is we paid over 4 million for him when he came in. Now, obviously, with the payments split over multiple years, the majority of that fee would have still been due. So, okay, we might have got 2 million for him, but that probably wouldn't even have covered what was left of his fee. So suddenly you're using money from the Goldson sale to kind of top that up. So I guess what we're saying is once we paid off all the kind of contractual elements that were outstanding, we made 800k, which isn't great, but at least we didn't lose money, and they're gone now. They're not our problem anymore. Last question then. Do you think that there's anyone else in the squad that kind of falls into that same bracket where you might end up just trying to sell them for what you can get, basically, to get them out? Because I think for me, the obvious one that jumps out, if the rumoured wage is true, is probably Matondo. I don't think, if he truly is on 30k, I'm not. He certainly isn't providing 30k worth of value to us at the minute.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I struggle to believe he's on that much. I believe he's probably on 20 something, but I would expect that it's near the middle of 20 something. But even then, though, given his age and that's a reasonable amount of money, so he will be a struggle to move because his injuries have just been horrendous. Not only have they been frequent, but they're always lengthy. So we're going to lose money on him, I'm pretty certain. He'll be one that we'll just need to move as best we can. I think we'll probably just have to take a huge cut on whatever value it is in order to for a club to subsidise his wages. in terms of if I was to pick people myself, Ben Davies could maybe be one. He's well paid. Hopefully, obviously he's on loan, so hopefully he'll have a good loan, and that'll help to push a club towards maybe paying for something, or indeed, if he gets a year of football and enjoys himself somewhere, he'll maybe be more likely to potentially take a bit of a cut in order to go and play. I think players aren't quite, especially away from the very high levels, players aren't always as money hungry as some people think they are. Players will, that love playing, will take little bits of cuts now and again to go places that they can do that. So he might be one. Having a wee quick scan through the team here. I don't think there's anyone else that really jumps out as being a trouble
I'm
one.
not convinced Dowell will be on a huge wage, but I doubt he's on peanuts either. He was kind of signed in that time when we were launching money at players, wasn't he?
I think he'll be easier to sell because he's not been problematic. So there'll probably be, in terms of, like, he's not really had loads of major injuries. He did have one or two, but he mostly just doesn't get picked. And when he does get picked, he's kind of fine but not great. So I think there'll be clubs that'll come for him. Like you say, it will come down to if he is on something higher, but he surely can't be on huge amounts. But that'd probably be the only ones left. I think everyone else seems okay.
Which again, as you say, isn't terrible. I mean, yes, it's not great that we've sold them. We've only got that much money in, but you're almost drawing the end of that cycle now. We've moved most of them on. We've got a younger squad, a lower wage, so potentially glimpses of light in the tunnel. Now we just need to see it on the pitch, I would say. So with that, I'm going to call it there. Thanks very much for everyone that has listened tonight. Appreciate it as always. If you have liked what you heard, then please do like and subscribe. Doug, thank you very much for coming on tonight.
Thanks very much for having me. It's always fun to chat about the jerseys we do, and let's hope for another good weekend of football.
Aye, here's hoping. But for now, folks, remember, every night's a Rangers Journal night.